Yeah, dear guests, colleagues, really happy to be here today and offering some of the German perspectives on emissions trading and the carbon border adjustment mechanism. I'm standing here as a representative from the German Emissions Trading Authority, abbreviated DEHSt. So that's a beautiful German abbreviation. It stands for Deutsche Emissionshandelsstelle. So if you ever come across that, so we are DEHSt. So what are our responsibilities? Just as a brief overview, it is very similar to what the two colleagues, and in particular Maria, has told us. It's implementing the emissions trading systems that are currently in place, ETS1 at the European level, but also a national system I'll be speaking about shortly, as well as now coming up the CBAM mechanism. We also are involved in climate projects, assessments and implementation. And we are dealing with the entire, obviously, compliance cycle, running these systems, being in touch with verifiers, obviously, the auctioning, allocation decisions, monitoring, so on and so forth. An aspect really near and dear to my heart are also our, let's say, policy activities in dialogue with national and European levels. So we conduct research, we cooperate with research institutions to also, in a way, make proposals and make contributions towards co-developing this policy landscape, this very important policy landscape at the European level, but also internationally. The colleague from the European Commission, he told us that they have put up a task force to talk to other countries now in light of CBAM and how they can possibly introduce carbon pricing systems on their own. And also here at the national level, as national competent authorities, we are having these discussions and exchanges also at the international level. Now, just as a brief overview, again, some graphs but I think it's quite complementary to what the colleagues have shown here. Emissions reductions in the EU ETS1, so focusing on the power sector and major industry. We already heard this system is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, and I think we all conclude that it has delivered and keeps on delivering. Emissions EU-wide have gone down by over 50% in this 20-year period, and the German installations, those who are located in Germany, obviously not just German companies, but it's always a geographical focus. So those companies operating in Germany have reduced their emissions similarly by minus 47%. That also shows the flexibility of the system that was already also mentioned, that it's not some strict mitigation goals year on year, but that companies always have the decision whether to abate or whether to purchase emissions allowances. So this economic flexibility is reducing overall costs, and we're seeing it here. And overall, we are together, all national competent authorities across Europe are on track to meeting the emissions reduction target of minus 62% in the ETS1 to be achieved by 2030. I already said it briefly when coming to DEHSt's responsibilities, that in Germany we have a second system in place that is complementing the EU ETS1. We abbreviate it, again, that's the German acronym DEHSt, that stands for National ETS. And this includes basically all fuels, mostly used in the transport and heating sectors. These are the sectors, that's no surprise, that are really difficult to abate, that have really had broadly sluggish progress over the past years across Europe. So the government decided 5 years ago or so to implement a second emissions trading system that is targeting more or less to cover all other greenhouse gas emissions, or at least from the combustion of fossil fuels outside the ETS1. And this has been in operation since 2021, initially with a fixed price period. So you see here on the orange bars that it had started at a rather modest price of 25 euro per ton of CO2 that has been ramped up to now this year standing at 55 euro. And next year there will be some sort of a price corridor in between 55 and 65 euros. So we'll be transitioning to some sort of auctioning system. And actually there is already the bridge built to the new EU ETS2, specifically for these sectors, that will start with basically compliance obligation in 2027. So nationally, we have already started working on that path of pricing these sectors. I understand in Ireland you have a tax for these sectors, and in a way this has been an instrument. It is still, we operate it as an emissions trading system, but it had a fixed price introductory period. If we now look at where we stand emissions-wise, taking both systems, we are covering, and that's a very high share actually, 85% of greenhouse gas emissions, not just CO2, 85% of greenhouse gas emissions in Germany are covered by both the ETS1 and our NEHS, the national system. You can see figures here for 2 years, 2022 and 2023. Also seeing that emissions have gone down significantly. There has been some, let's say, particular effects due to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine that have had emissions in 2022 not go down as much as we would have hoped to. We had to reconfigure, as had others, our energy system. But then in 2023, emissions have gone down by over 10%. There was a huge reduction, particularly, and that was also already mentioned, in the energy sector, covered in the ETS1. You can see the figures here. And so now both systems are roughly at the same share of just a bit over 40% of national greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a big emissions coverage. To my understanding, this is, when we think about emissions trading, I don't know of any country, at least any big country, that is having a higher emissions coverage. So carbon pricing is playing a big, big role in Germany, and it will, of course, do so and continue to do so at the European level, in particular with the introduction of the ETS2 in 2027. And carbon pricing is generating important government revenue. We are seeing here in blue the auction results. That's that's yearly national totals of auction results in the ETS1 since 2008 when auctioning started. And then in green, you see the bars shoot up there in 2021 and the years following. These are our sales of emission certificates in the national system. And the numbers are given here on the slides. ETS1 auctions have totaled over 41 billion euros over this now, close to 20-year period. And in the short existence of the national system, the 4 years have also brought revenues of over 37 billion euros in Germany. And these revenues are not lost, and there's not money sent to fossil fuel exporters around the world, but they are staying in the country and also, of course, are used for European purposes in part, and they are being distributed through a specialized fund for purposes of carbon reduction, but also social acceptance and to accompany these change processes. That's very, very important to also think about the just transition. Another key word here that we need to keep in mind, in particular now as we move into the ETS2 and the coming price increases for heating and transport fuels. That's a very sensitive aspect, obviously, for households across Europe, and we need to accompany this with targeted policies, really focusing in particular vulnerable households, but as well also, of course, retrofit programs, many, let's say, different initiatives under a well-balanced policy mix to accompany that transition process and to leave no one behind. So CBAM, another keyword mentioned a few times. I will focus on maybe a few aspects that have not been mentioned in such, let's say, in such depth. The sectors are given here. They were already shown by Maria previously. And yes, it's replacing the free allocation step by step as an instrument for carbon protection domestically. What I also find very important is this international dimension that we are really providing incentives also for third countries to develop their carbon pricing systems. And actually the interest that is shown towards us from countries around the world, Indonesia or Turkey, just to mention two here, and that was voiced by the colleague from the European Commission, that is really a very positive sign that ultimately CBAM may be, let's say, a launch pad for stronger climate policies around the world, as it is really setting incentives for other countries to develop their monitoring systems, to introduce carbon pricing, and to collect the revenue themselves. So it's really also an opportunity, an impetus, so to say, to generate government revenue for other countries who then may go on or step on the bandwagon of stronger climate protection around the world. So this clearly is my personal hope, but I think we're also seeing steps in this direction. So to finish off, this Fit for 55 package by the European Commission that was designed to meet or to allow meeting the climate targets for 2030 is really significantly strengthening carbon pricing and the European Union emissions trading systems as the cornerstone of EU climate policy. I mentioned the emissions coverage of 85% for Germany in, let's say, both perspectives, ETS 1 and then the fuels and heating sectors, that will help us achieve the climate targets and moving away from the free allocation and really introducing CBAM will help us through the full auctioning in the EU, in the ETS, or the growing auctioning in the ETS 1, but also outside of CBAM right from the beginning, the full auctioning in the EU ETS 2 to generate these important revenues that we will then be using to have this fair transition I was already speaking to. And the climate protection efforts will also become more direct by reducing the free allocation. There is, from the perspective of a national competent authority, a high time pressure for implementation. That's a lot of work. I think we all know what we're talking about, but we're well underway and really trying to make our contribution to making this a success. Thank you.